Wir müssen
Obviously, we must ensure that where you've got illegal migration, people spending all their money on traffickers, that we don't end up there. This is why we entered into the agreement with Turkey. This has been much criticised. It was precisely to try and turn illegal migration into legal migration. The UNHCR has said that the people that we should be helping, that was our common goal, but we weren't adequately prepared, and we've had to learn from that. So we've founded Frontex, we've got the Sophia project, we've got a partnership with Africa, we've built up the Coast Guard of Libya in Palermo. There's a Libya conference, and my only desire is that we would have a uniform Libya policy in Europe so that the people don't get two different stories being told to them. But there where we have not been sufficiently committed, we can actually learn from the past, and I think now we need to look up, say we've learned from our mistakes, we will do it differently, and this partnership with Africa is precisely part of that. Let me round off with climate protection. I've just said a little about gas. We've got very ambitious climate objectives, and we will be trying to attain those objectives, and in 2030 we really do need to make sure that we've attained those goals. We've got the climate legislation in place, as Mrs. Keller well knows. Let me say that it was Wolfgang Schäuble in the G20 under the presidency of Germany who tackled tax avoidance, trying to put together a BEPS international agreement, and this is precisely now what's being implemented, and I think Germany has played a very important contribution in bringing that about.
Iniziamo il Catch the Eye, vi riprego.
So, Catch the Eye. Now, please do respect the 1 minute speaking time each. At 5:20, 5:22, I shall be interrupting the Catch the Eye procedure in order to give the floor to Chancellor Merkel for her to respond, because we have to finish this entire session by 5:30. Mr. Caspary.
Au revoir, Monsieur le Président de la Commission européenne.
Well, goodbye to the President of the Commission.
La parola all'onorevole Caspary.
Mr. Caspary.
Sehr geehrte Frau Bundeskanzlerin.
Chancellor, thank you very much for having held the European Union together with us over the last 13 years, and I think this discussion has shown how important that is. In the preparation for today's meeting, we have seen socialists blaming you on Twitter for the fact that some European countries haven't overcome the consequences of the euro crisis. Of course, which is partly due to the mistaken policies of the socialists. We Christian Democrats have done our best to stabilize the situation in Spain and Portugal and in Ireland with solidarity and prudence. And we think that we have you to thank for the role that you and your government played in these crucial years. Second point, Guy Verhofstadt touched on a number of issues. In 2004, he was the Spitzenkandidat for the Liberals. 2014 he was again in that process. Now he wants to stop it. We're grateful to you for your support to Manfred Weber, because I think the Spitzenkandidat process brings more democracy into the European elections and into the European institutions.
Androulakis.
Androulakis.
Onorevole Androulakis.
Λάρια, έχετε συνδέσει το όνομά σας με τη διαχείριση δύο.
Thank you. You said that you had managed two crises, and that following the euro area crisis and the migration crisis, there was now stability. You took unilateral decisions moving away from the acquis communautaire. We need to share our fears and act together. We've seen more fear growing during your own period in power, and the only people who benefited from that were Eurosceptics and the far right. So I would like to ask you whether you do not regret the way in which you managed the economic and financial crisis in my country, the flames that fanned. I think that although the system had many faults, you also bear some responsibility. 500,000 young people emigrated. They didn't see any solution to their problems. We still have financial problems, and many years on, after many bailouts and programs, we're not really seeing the change to society that we would have wanted.
Chancellor, thank you for coming to the European Parliament. It feels a bit like being in the Bundestag today. Now, the French President Macron wants a real EU arm, in his words, to take on the USA, as he says, Russia and China too. And the French Finance Minister, Monsieur Le Maire, believes the EU must be an empire, in his words. So do you believe, as German Chancellor, in a new single European federal superstate or in a EU empire? Thank you.
La parola all'onorevole Wikström.
Ms. Wikström.
Thank you, President. Thanks to you, Madam Chancellor. Trust and European values is really your key message in your speech, and for that I thank you. Now, the cases of Lampedusa, of Aquarius, clearly shows that what we need in Europe today is a common European asylum system based on humanity, on European values and solidarity. Now, the Dublin file is still blocked in Council, and I would like to ask you, what can you do during days to come to unblock and enable us to deliver on a common European asylum system before the elections, so that trust and solidarity and even reconciliation can remain a core message of the European institutions? And I wish you all the best for your future, and I thank you for everything that you have done for this union.
Onorevole Monod.
Mr. Monod.
Madame la Chancelière, vos 13 années de pouvoir en Allemagne.
Thank you. What you've done in Germany is to take Europe to an economic, social and cultural dislocation, and your decision, unthinking unilateral decision to open up Germany to migrants with the servile permission of Mr. Juncker, has led to a situation where we have 4 million migrants, supposed refugees in the EU now since 2015. In the Schengen area, because we don't have national borders, we've seen this wave of supposed climate refugees coming into Europe, and especially into France. And this obsession with immigration in France and Germany has been disastrous for the safety of Europeans, as in Cologne and in the Bataclan in Paris. We're seeing effects on the economy as well. This obsession with budgetary rigour has led to trade surpluses at the expense of our partners in the euro area, especially France and Italy, the unemployed, purchasing power going down, especially for pensioners, especially including Germans. So after what you've done, Ms. Merkel, with Mr. Macron, how can you give lessons on being a European to the patriots of your country? I warn you that if you try to be the next president of the Commission, then patriots will block that. Thank you. Most Italians, following the harsh rules imposed by the EU, which I would say is partly being imposed by Germany was rather reminiscent of the invasion of German forces, which is something that we've recently been commemorating. Italy just wants to solve its own problems by itself. Can you not offer it that gesture? It's not about declarations, but about true solidarity to 5 or 6 million Italians living in poverty because of your austerity policy. They're now living in poverty. Thank you, Chancellor. Mr. Fontoulis.
Κυρία Μέρκελ, με τη μέχρι τώρα πολιτική σας διαδρομή και τις πράξεις σας...
Madam Merkel, the policy that you've deployed as German Chancellor, I think, has shown that you're one of the key actors in globalization and have contributed to things that have tormented Europeans. You've allowed thousands of or millions of refugees to come into Europe, and you have led the attacks against the values and principles that we hold dear as a nation. You're trying to replace and substitute states by groups who are at the service of large multinational companies. You've led a fierce fight against the Greek people, and you are responsible for the current economic and financial crisis. You're trying to take on the mantle of what is truly Greek, and you have met your end, or soon will meet your political end, and I think what will be left is the accident that you have brought about, and I do hope that you will have regrets there concerning that.
Chancellor, thank you very much for your speech and for your work, what you have been doing in the last few years. What I always wanted to highlight when your policies are discussed, I'm just here in the middle. Anyway, in EPP from Hungary. So what I wanted to point out when looking at your policies is that just before the European election, it's extremely important that we send a message out to the European poor, every fifth citizen of ours, that this is not a double-speed Europe. In Eastern Europe, poverty has to be stopped to make sure that we will be strong Europe enough to have those who you wish to see on your labour market. But there are so many Europeans waiting to be working on your labour market. So please assist the member states to use the money in the next 8 months, which is in their budget for poverty. Because it's all about 50% of the poverty money is still not used. So, and also for the next MMF, please try to make sure that there is no budget line working on poverty inside of Europe, and then we can turn to the African poverty, because we have very, very good insertion and integration models throughout Eastern Europe, but also in the Balkans, and also in your countries. I'm visiting a lot of refugee projects with Syrians, and I would like to ask you to speed up their employment, because they go crazy sitting at home for 2 years waiting to get jobs. Also on those guys who you are going to send back to Africa, please make sure that they get the same educational projects that we get in Europe, and also because you are a very big border opener, and we see you in Sopron at the European picnic very often. Please make sure that before you open up the big borders, open up the small ones, just next to Austria. Hungarian workers are standing on the border, waiting to go to work every morning for the last 3 weeks. Thank you very much.
Vi prego di rispettare I tempi.
Please do respect the time allocated. We'll take the time away from your own group. You spoke for 2 minutes, Vice President, instead of 1. Mr. Salini.
Grazie, Cancelliere.
Thank you. Chancellor, 2 comments as an Italian. Italy is proud to be a founding member of the EU. Italy wants to grow. I'm over here, standing up. So Italy wants to grow together with Europe, not against Europe. Italy is far more than its current pathetic national budget. We believe in grands œuvres. We believe in progress, investment and peace, and we believe that the continent does have the production capacity that it has believed in. The heart of Europe may be Bavaria and Lombardy, however important the port of Rotterdam is. We're producers more than we are traders. And I would like to pick up on Mr. Bullman's comments. He said that Germany cannot afford to fail on Europe. Neither can Italy. Italy cannot afford to fail, and nor can it afford to play with the peace that Europe has achieved. Ms. Hautala.
Chancellor, we are now celebrating the 70 years of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I noticed that you yourself had expressed doubts about whether such a declaration could be adopted today in the atmosphere we have. To quote you, you said, "I fear not." And I'd like to ask you how to deal with the autocrats that are surrounding the European Union who don't care about this declaration, how to deal with the threats within that has been mentioned many times in this discussion. And I wish you said something about your own political family that seems to tolerate illiberalism and populism and nationalism. Isn't it something that we should address? Because if we don't start at home, how can we defend universal human rights in the world?
Onorevole Andrew.
Mr. Andrew.
Jolainen, allora. Vous êtes ici, Andrew, c'est 29, hein?
Ja, Frau Bundeskanzlerin.
Chancellor, we come from the same region. We are familiar with the debates and the opinions prevailing in Germany. Since I've been in European politics, I've heard that Germany is the paymaster. And we know that this can be a very toxic word. It's a sign that we're on the defensive with regard to new ideas, that we keep on saying, oh, how much is this going to cost? What would you say? What do we have to do to explain to Germans that actually we are winners from European integration? I think precisely before the European elections, it would be time to go on the offensive and convince Europeans that we really benefit. I mean, not just Germans, but we benefit extraordinarily from the EU. And what about the Deposit Guarantee Fund, the Bank Recovery Fund? All of these ideas that come out of the European hat, as it were, elicit this Pavlovian reaction. This is going to cost us money. We don't want it. You've stressed solidarity, and we need to go along with that and not always refuse.
Kuloglu.
Mrs. Chancellor, I carefully listened to your speech. You said 15 times tolerance. That's very good. You said 10 times solidarity. That's very good. But you never said one word, austerity. And you know the austerity policies are the one they are undermining democracy in Europe. They are provoking anger, frustration, insecurity, and this is why the extreme left is rising. Your policies, unfortunately, are creating the Frankenstein. We need Europe. We need more Europe, but we need more social Europe. We need more justice Europe, and that's how we will have democracy. Thank you very much.
Onorevole Batten.
Mr. Batten.
Madam Chancellor, the German people have been very unfortunate in their leaders. Twice already in the last 100 years they have plunged Europe into disaster. German militarism caused the First World War, destroyed the nations of Europe and ushered in communism. The Second World War brought levels of depravity never seen before in Europe. Now you're bringing about disaster for a third time. European political and economic integration is disastrous. But worse than that, you have opened up Europe's borders to untold millions of migrants. Your decision to open Europe's borders to indiscriminately import millions of people will do untold damage to European societies for generations to come. The never-ending process of European integration will destroy democratic nation states. If Britain had a Prime Minister with any guts or backbone, we would have left long ago. Exit cannot come fast enough. Thank you.
Onorevole Golnisch.
Mr. Golnisch.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, mais j'ai appuyé sur le bouton.
Thank you. I actually pressed the button after Mr. Voigt. Can you give him the floor instead, then?
Onorevole, decido io chi deve parlare.
I give the floor. If you wish to speak, please speak. I can't change it. It's not up to you to choose who speaks.
Que tout a été fait.
Oh, well, that's a shame, because I was hoping he would speak before me. I'll be brief. Chancellor, you spoke about human rights. There are hundreds or even thousands of people in your country who are being prosecuted for their ideas. I may not agree with them. They don't agree with the dogma which has been imposed since the Second World War. A 90-year-old woman, Ursula Verbeck, has been imprisoned. She's dying. There's a man who's dying in prison now, both legs with gangrene, lawyer Ernst Mahler. So, with those two examples, Chancellor, can you not see that we're going back to the darkest days of the history of your country, the kind of dictatorships that we supposedly want to avoid now?
Dorfmann.
Sir Dorfmann.
Grazie, Presidente, che mi dà la parola.
Thank you for the floor.
Ich kann alles.
Chancellor, I would underscore everything that you said today. I'm from South Tyrol. You'll be familiar with the area, and you know how important the Schengen Agreement is for us. You'll also be aware that the Brenner Pass that was closed 100 years ago was opened, and the appeal therefore comes from me. Your country has for years controlled your southern border, and when people sit in jams every day having to wait to be checked, then they will no longer believe in Europe. When people who wish to cross to go shopping or to work are going to have to sit in a jam waiting to cross once again, they're going to give up on Europe. And so I think it would be courageous if you were to stop that farce. You know that this doesn't help security. Most of these border crossing points are open, a few of them are controlled, and it's just there that the illegal traffickers are not going to go. So it's important, therefore, that the border controls between Germany and Austria are finally consigned to the past. Thank you.
Onorevole Radke.
Mr. Radke.
Ja, sehr geehrte Frau.
Yes, Madam Chancellor, thank you very much for your excellent speech and your clear words. Your speech looked at what the range of opinions are here is even more worthy. We have to hear such a nonsense here in this hemicycle. We see that certain people who are so critical of Europe are the first to be at the bar in the morning, but your speech was even more valuable, I think, in this context. One of the important questions for the future that you mentioned, please add the European social market economy as a focus, because the developments that we are witnessing on the labour market, not only in Germany, but throughout the European Union, really cause for concern. And I would be delighted to see you using the remaining time you have in office as Chancellor to make progress there with regard to promoting the social market economy.
Mr. Andrea.
Numero 29.
Number 29. It's you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, but my name is Tibor Sanye, if it helps you. Madam Chancellor, I was really impressed with your recent statement at the Kristallnacht commemoration, and I join your warning that political violence and extremism must be stopped at the roots, at the first sign of anti-democratic action and hate speech, before they got a chance to destroy our democracies or lives. Regarding today's dangers overshadowing the EU's future, however, I must say that you and your wider political family, the EPP, have failed in this by missing the chance to stop Fidesz and halt Orban anti-European and anti-democratic illiberal political course based on corruption and inhuman government. But I'm a Hungarian socialist. I know our duties. But it is my urgent plea to you, Madam Chancellor, to use your full political weight in the European Council and your important leverage within your political family to help clear this picture by distanciating your party from Fidesz and condemning and hopefully ending Orban's illiberal political surge in Europe. Thank you.
Onorevole, lei ha chiesto la parola con la carta dell'onorevole.
Well, you were holding up Mr. Andria's card, so terribly sorry, but that's what I saw. So that explains the confusion. Mr. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Frau Merkel, I would like to ask you, Madam, if you think that it's a good way to thank our American friends after liberating Europe, liberating France and helping Britain and liberating Germany. Do you think it's a good way to thank them by insisting on a European army and remarks by President Macron, which were most unhelpful, that were taken awry by the American president? Is this the way we should be treating them? And do you think that Mr. Putin will take any European army that does not include the Americans or the British remotely seriously? Thank you.
Onorevole Epitideios.
Mr. Epitideios.
Epitideios.
Grazie, Presidente. Καλώς ήρθατε, κυρία Καγκελάρια.
Thank you. Chancellor, you were talking about the future of Europe. I'm trying to work out what kind of Europe you're talking about. A Europe that engages in daily destruction? That's the kind of thing that you've been doing. I won't go through the catalogue of what you've done, but referring to Greece, you've destroyed the heritage of Greece, destroyed the Greek economy, put us into poverty. Chancellor, the ancient Greeks, when they wanted to refer to someone who was guilty of an outrage, something horrible, says the person who has hurt you will cure you. Well, I don't know whether you're aware of the crime that you've committed against Greece, but you need to cure it now. You need to cure the wound that you have caused. Compensate for that economic harm. Perhaps returning the compensation that was paid. Pay compensation for the occupation period. We also have a poem that from Friedrich Schiller about a condemned Greek that you may recall.
Madame la Chancelière, merci d'être parmi nous.
Thank you for coming here, Madam Chancellor. I'd like to talk about the taxation of the digital giants, and I think that there is much expectation in the minds of citizens that this should happen, because we cannot allow the most powerful to get off scot-free. There's a double standard at the heart of this, which feeds the populists. This is a real power struggle for Europe, and we have to show our citizens and the rest of the world that Europe isn't naive and that it is able to impose its rules. We need to show that we can pull together, but there's hesitation, and you yourself, Chancellor, said you're waiting for an international solution, which means that nothing will happen. This is an enormous responsibility, because taxing GAFA is one of the things that will allow us to put paid to the language of our critics. Do you have a different solution, Madam?
Mr.
Rubik.
Frau Bundeskanzler.
Chancellor, I am proud of my EPP family. On the 27th of June in 2007, in the German presidency, adopted the roaming directive here in Parliament, which we signed with Reding and Niebler, Pöttering and Barroso. So that was an achievement. At that time, we had a price per minute of 0.09 cents. Now it's 0.019. And back in 2006, under Wolfgang Schüssel, we got the first complaint that the roaming directive was the shortest one ever in terms of the time it took to adopt it. So we have helped establish the global digital market. I think we are leading in areas such as these technologies. So please help us in the multi-annual financial framework programme to continue to pursue these important goals.
Mr. Zorrinho. Chancellor. Welcome to the debate on the future of Europe. 500 million citizens are at stake. But so is the planet. So is the future of the planet. Sustainability. We need to combat inequality, combat poverty, and have more trade agreements. I do agree with you on many occasions. I know that you believe in Europe, and I know that you profoundly believe in the values of Europe. And I'm sure you know that we need cohesion and internal convergence in order for Europe to be successful in the world. And for that reason, Chancellor, we need to be ambitious. We need to have a balanced monetary area with own resources in the euro area. Tolerance is the soul of Europe, as are cohesion and convergence. How can you help strengthen the euro area and the EU budget? Mr. Lange.
Thank you, Mr. President. And before I ask my question to the Chancellor, I have to get something off my chest, and it regards our colleague in seat number 20, colleague Farage. I would say to our guest, don't take his grandstanding too seriously. This is a man who actually led his country, led his party to a Brexit vote, only the next day to admit that he lied and tricked and to jump ship and leave his party. This is not leadership, it's a circus. Secondly, I'm glad you're here, Mr. Farage. Secondly, he says he doesn't want to be part of a German European Union, yet he has made sure that 2 of his children have German passports. This man wouldn't know hypocrisy if it stared him straight in the face. Und jetzt kommt meine Frage.
And now my question, which I will ask in Dutch for the people back home. Madam Chancellor, you talked about a European army. Can you explain to people in the Netherlands, can you reassure them that you're not talking about a European army, but an army of Europeans? In other words, it will remain a national decision to deploy people, but that we will certainly be working together much more closely. Thank you.
Javi López.
Mr. Javi López.
Gracias, Presidente. Cancillera.
Thank you, President. Chancellor Merkel, you've come to visit us in the European Parliament at a very significant and critical moment in your career, and a significant and critical moment for Europe. You'll be standing down now in your party and standing down as Chancellor, so perhaps it's a good time to take stock of your time in office, but also of the last decade in the EU. There are various different ways of looking at your legacy: moral leadership, historic leadership, a pillar of stability for Europe. That's one way of looking at it. Or the last person responsible for negligent economic management of sovereign debt and standing in the way of the necessary reform. So what will historians say about your legacy? I think it will depend on what happens over the next couple of years. Will you take reform of the euro area, migration, common foreign and security policy forward so that we have one single, strong, fair voice of Europe in the world, or not?
Signora Cancelliera, io ho sempre...
Chancellor, I've always appreciated the fact that you are a very dedicated person. You've always shown very strong leadership. The EU has not always shown the same. We can't have a 2 or 3 speed Europe. I think the European Parliament can play an important role in terms of the citizens' expectations. We need to be sending out the right message. People have been talking about migration, the environment, common defence policy, a European army. I think in terms of migration, the European Parliament has put forward a solution, but we're still at an impasse. I deal with international trade, and I think that the best answer that Europe can give is to help our companies, especially SMEs. Very often they don't understand the mechanisms, the language, the strategy, the objectives that the EU has. If we can get closer to our businesses, then we'll be able to give a better answer for jobs. Ms. Valenciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's very useful that you're coming here to Parliament, because it's clear that the Trojan horse of the EU is present here in this chamber as well. And this is precisely why we are calling on the pro-European leaders of Europe to show a little bit more firmness, to show a little bit more conviction, a little bit more strength, so that we are the ones who are pushing the European integration process forward, and not let them push forward and promote the disintegration of Europe and the destruction of it. Therefore, it is a matter of urgency that you shift things forward in Council. A number of files that we've called for that are blocked. Very powerful forces have entered Europe to try to break down what we have spent so much time to build up. And you, in Germany, as we've seen today, so many Germans have taken the floor today. You have a particular responsibility to shoulder, and we hope that you succeed in your historic task.
Concludiamo.
Rosati is the next speaker. We only have 3 more speakers before we give the floor to the Chancellor again.
Mr. President, Madam Chancellor, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your leadership. We appreciate very much your efforts to bring a stronger Europe. In your speech, you focus on the need to have a common foreign policy here in Europe, and I very much share your views. In this context, I would like to ask you, what should we do and how should our policy be shaped against Russia? We have still the situation in which people are dying in eastern Ukraine. We've been now in the 5th year of negotiating with Russia to implement the so-called Minsk agreements. What is the recipe for making Russia more accommodative and more willing simply to take into account our expectations? What is your recipe to confront the more and more aggressive Russia here in Europe and simply bring peace to Ukraine?
Purtroppo interrompere qui il catch the eye perché il cancelliere deve...
The Chancellor will have to leave, so I'm afraid we have to stop there.